Hi, this is Nick Van Dyk from Redemption, and you're listening to Sonic Perspectives.
Hey everyone, Gonzo here with Sonic Perspectives. Joining me today is a fella who bleeds so much badassery that routine badassery bores him. When he's not dictating what you and I consume as entertainment, he is adding to a legendary wine collection that is surely worth more than my house is by this point. And when he's not doing that, he's one of the most metal match-fornicators I know. He shreds like a beast with the guitars I grew up worshipping, and he is the heart and soul of one of the most revered prog metal bands to come down the pike in the past 15 years. And I'm fortunate enough to call this guy my friend, Mr. Nick Van Dyk. What a pleasure to speak with you again.
I don't always do interviews, but when I do them with Gonzo. I mean, with that introduction, you've made me the most interesting man in the world. How can I not respond that way?
Oh, well, there you go. No, I'm not trying to flatter you. Why do you ask?
No. It's way too flattering, but I'm appreciative of our friendship and appreciative of the opportunity to speak with you again.
Awesome. Long Night's Journey into Day is... Did I say that right?
You did.
Okay, cool, because I still get it confused with the play, and I kind of
Yep.
I jumble my words a lot. Long Night's Journey into Day, without doubt, was my most anticipated record of the year.
I hope we delivered.
I'm enjoying it, and it's growing on me. Okay, and I had known about Tom Englund being your new singer for the better part of a year. But when I first started listening to it and that voice came in, it was still kind of a shock not to hear Ray. I mean, I literally tweaked. I twitched when the voice started coming in. It was a little bizarre. So,
not an uncommon response, and not one that is particularly surprising.
Well, do you care to expand a little bit on that? I mean, this band has been your baby for 17 years now, and to make such a shift with different styles of singers and different singers,
we can certainly talk about everything related to that, including the circumstances for the change and all that good stuff if you like. I imagine my North Star was, and I'm not in any way comparing us in terms of quality or popularity with Black Sabbath, but my North Star was always, this is our heaven and hell. And I'm sure the same people that would be surprised to hear Tom singing by us would be the same type of people that would be shocked to hear the first notes of Neon Nights coming out of Dio rather than Ozzy. So it's always hard to make a change, particularly when you've had an iconic vocalist like Ray in the band. I do think, and also, we're replacing him with somebody who's also an iconic vocalist and has a very distinct, distinct sound that he is known for. So you're used to hearing one thing, and then you're hearing something else that you're already prepared to listen to in a different context. So that it can be a little bit jarring. On the other hand, I almost think there are more similarities between the two of them than most people think about at first blush. 10 or 15 years ago, Ray had a really high range. He doesn't really stretch that much into it anymore, not because, it's one thing is just a function of aging, but it's also not what he's interested in doing. And for most of what he's done with us recently, with a few notes here or there, it's been a sort of a mid-range, very emotional, almost a smoky delivery. His favorite singer has always been Steve Perry, who has that sort of smoky aspect to his voice. And, Tom is in that same sort of, I can't remember if it's genus or phylum or whatever, but he's in that same sort of general ilk. And the most important common denominator for a vocalist for us, obviously it's got to be a good singer, but our music works or it doesn't based on the ability of the audience and us to connect emotionally. And these are not lyrics about dragons and trolls. They're lyrics about loss and human frailty and fear and anxiety and triumph and all the other aspects of what it's like to be a complex human being living in a complicated world. And you have to be able to invest yourself emotionally in that, or it doesn't work very well. So we could have had a phenomenal singer who was more of a power metal operatic type, and it wouldn't have worked, even if they were phenomenal. But Michael Kiske is one of my favorite vocalists of all time. He wouldn't work singing with us. Just stylistically, too far afield from what we want to do. So Tom's emotional qualities and the fact that he's used to investing himself in lyrics about largely the same subject matter made him a logical choice, plus the fact that he's so talented and the fact that he's been a friend for a long time. Really, the Evergrey has a similar, again, same genus of lyrical content, more or less. We just have a happy ending at the end, which I attribute to the sun in Los Angeles versus Gothenburg. So I told him this is going to be like Evergrey, but 30% less depressing. So
yeah, you're right. I didn't really feel like killing myself after I listened to the new album.
That's good.
Yeah, not so much with Evergrey. And
I remember years ago we were listening to Origins of Ruin, which has the title song there. Is this extremely bleak little piano piece with Ray singing over it, and we listened to it when it was all done, and he silence, and he looks up and goes, "Give me a rope." So we try not to be that bleak all the time.
And yet, you mentioned Tom's emotional delivery. I mean, he's made a name for himself by conveying a great deal of anguish when he sings.
Yep.
So was it a little weird to kind of balance that out with the whole light and shade thing that you guys do? I mean, is that new territory for him to not be so suicide-y?
Yeah, well, there is a lot of angst in our lyrics. The biggest contrast, and I knew as I was writing it, there are some songs that, you always try and write quality stuff. There are some times where you feel like you have captured lightning in a bottle, and you can't really do that by design. It's like, I'm going to set out to write a really good song instead of just a good song. Of course, you want to write the best song you can. The songs come together, and some come together in ways that appeal to different people more or less than others. But I knew when we were working on Indulge in Color that this was going to be a very special song. And it's also very far afield for the reasons you mentioned in terms of its positivity, even though it's not all sunshine and roses, but it's a very affirmational statement in the chorus, and it's over a major chord progression, both of which are sort of not typical for Tom. Mm-hmm. But I thought if he can pull it off, it's going to be magnificent. And it's he's a extremely versatile vocalist. Obviously, even what he does in Evergrey is pretty remarkable. But beyond that, he's got a couple of other projects along with his guest work that he does, and he can really. He's also worked on pop music, which nobody's heard, but it's phenomenal for what it is. And he's just a great songwriter, and I think his vocal versatility. It's Evergrey's the meat and potatoes of it, but he can do stuff on either side of it. So I think him stretching a little bit and doing stuff like Indulge in Color or the end of the title track is a similar sort of affirmational thing. It sounds awesome. And I knew as we were doing it, I'm like, Tom's going to be able to pull this off, and it's going to be eye-opening for a lot of people. Now, I'm not immune. I should be, but I'm not immune to social media responses to our released music. And there are more than a few people that say Tom is holding back and it doesn't sound as anguished as it is in Evergrey. You sort of can't win. Some people say he sounds too anguished all the time. Some people don't think he sounds anguished enough. Tom specifically, we don't want to sound exactly like Evergrey, and given how distinctive his voice is, we have to take measures where we can to not sound like Evergrey, just like we had to take measures where we could to not sound exactly like Fate's Warning. Most of that was done compositionally. In the case of Tom, he's not playing guitar in this band for a reason, and he's not being the primary writer of the music for a reason, although he's certainly going to weigh in increasingly so as we go forward. And he's not singing exactly the way he does in Evergrey by design. So he's certainly, some of it may also be that my melody lines I wrote them independent of who the vocalist was going to be, and they're certainly within his range. They may not be within the absolute wheelhouse of the Tom at his most anguished. So, we'll get a feel for that. But I think once people get over the shock, they will realize it's pretty damn awesome.
You've already touched on my next question. You went from having a singer who hated guitar solos to having a singer who's a pretty damn good soloist himself.
Yep.
So you just mentioned that Tom will not be playing guitar with Redemption?
That's correct.
In the live setting?
Correct.
Wow. So are you going to bring somebody else in for the live setting?
Simone Mularoni from DGM is going to be coming over to play our dates with us.
That is amazing. That dude smokes.
Yeah. I think part of the reason why Tom was so fired up to do this is, I'm going to odd reference back in the 70s when Phil Collins had this band Brand X on the side that played fusion stuff. He said Genesis is my wife and Brand X is my mistress. And it gave him an opportunity to play with other musicians. And I think, Evergrey is Tom's wife and children. But he and Simone were friends. He actually introduced us, and Simone was I'm very flattered to say that he was a fan of Redemption. The guy's one of the great guitar players in the world. I mean, he's just phenomenal, and I think Tom loves the opportunity to play with him, and also Vikram, who just joined us on keyboards. Unbelievable talent. I think, frankly, we have the most talented lineup we've ever had by far, and I think Tom enjoys the opportunity to work with this set of musicians.
That's what you just said about this being your most talented lineup thus far. That's huge. That is a huge statement.
Yeah, it's saying something. But I mean, Vikram, might be the single most talented musician I've ever met. The guy plays 5 instruments. He's totally off the charts in terms of just his ear and his musical capability, and the fact that he's got perfect pitch, and the fact that he came out and hung out with my family. My wife and daughter, Bohemian Rhapsody was on the radio as they were driving home, and he's like, "Do you know how to play?" And he's like, "Not really." And then he just played the thing by ear perfectly the entire song. Huh. So yeah, it's crazy how talented that guy is. Simone is an unbelievably talented guitar player. I'm leaving out the fact that we're very lucky to have Chris Poland, who's phenomenal talent in his own right, play on this record as well. And it's just I'm flattered and humbled that they're all interested in being part of this, creative process.
You have managed to surround yourself with so much skill. I mean, never mind.
Yeah, they can't. I'm smart enough. I pay for everything and write the music, and they can't throw me into the band, even though I'm the least talented member. But no, I mean, there are. I'm being a little facetious, but I'm very, very lucky that I've found the creative partners that I have. And I've been with Chris, our drummer, for 15 years now. He's for all intents and purposes, a full creative partner with what we do. We're very lucky to have Sean, who's an unbelievably talented bassist, and then we've talked about Simone and Vic and Tom being one of the truly iconic vocalists in the metal world. I mean, I'm fired up.
Yeah, and your previous lineup was not exactly shabby itself. I mean, you went from having one iconic singer to another iconic singer.
Yep.
Yeah, how does it differ? How does it differ working with Tom than it did working with Ray?
Well, it's fun. Ray, but I guess this one similarity is we were both friends before we worked together. But Ray is gifted with an unbelievable voice. And I think he would even agree if he was on a conference call with us right now, may not be the least lazy person in the world. Whereas Tom is a type A personality workaholic like myself. So when Ray and I would record, he'd come over, we'd, do a few lines, not of cocaine, but of recording vocals. We'd have a glass of wine, and we'd come back and do a couple more lines a couple of days later. And part of my goal there, I always wanted to respect Fate's Warning. I always wanted to not stress Ray out. I always wanted this to be a fun thing for him. So the last thing in the world I wanted him to feel like was he's going to be locked in a studio for 2 weeks, singing for 12 hours a day, which he hates. So we would stretch it out, and it might take 6 or 8 weeks to record vocals for the album. But we might have gotten stressed out once in that 6 or 8 week period, as opposed to it being an unpleasant experience. So I never really wanted to push, him the way I would push somebody that worked for me, for example. Mm-hmm. With Tom, I'd given him the stuff, and we can get through how I convinced him to be in the band in the first place, but I'd given him the stuff, and he was working on it. And, a couple of weeks had gone by, and I kind of wanted to hear what it was going to sound like, both as a fan of his and also for, my own interest in what was the music going to sound like. So I sort of gently asked him for the stuff, and he didn't respond. And then a week later, he said, and he was coming over maybe 2 weeks after that with his family to visit. And he said, "Look, you are like me. I know you. I would be worried. I'm sure you are worried. I'm telling you, do not be worried." I'm like, okay. And then so he came over. I picked his family up at the airport. We came over to the house, opened a couple of beers, and he played what he had done, and it was 85% finished.
Wow.
With a whole bunch of background vocals and call and response and textured things and other arrangements that I would not have thought to do. So he worked his ass off, and it was awesome.
And that was the whole album.
Yeah, we spent probably a total of 10 hours working on vocals over the week that he was here, just to add a couple of things here or there, or change this or that. But it was basically he worked his ass off and came here with it almost all the way finished.
That's incredible.
Now, I had given him my vocal lines, and he changed them where he felt they needed to be changed. And there are some spots where he did that, and it's pretty sublime. But most of them he kept more or less as is. So he didn't have to come up with that. That was a place to start. But yeah, I mean, he did a remarkable amount of work, and I think that reflects both his Type A personality, but also his experience as a composer. Ray's a vocalist, not a composer. Tom's both.
I'm going to take the bait. How did you convince Tom to join your band?
It was a process. I mean, obviously we'd known each other for a long time, and he and Henrik come over to the States every once in a while, and we always get together, and we actually spent a fair amount of time hanging out with Ray, actually. So there was a friendship among all of us, as well as a certain degree of professional respect. And we had talked, I think, over the years about maybe doing something together, on a less formal basis. But when it became evident that Ray was going to need to move on, we had a short list of singers, and Tom was at the top of the list for the reasons that I mentioned. So I told him that Ray was going to leave, and I said, would you ever be interested in doing this? And he said, well, we'll talk about it sometime. So I went to Gothenburg, and we hung out, and after I got a couple of drinks in him, I said, well, what do you think? And he said, if the music sucks, can I tell you? And I said, if the music sucks, you better tell me. And he said, all right. And I'd sent him the demos, and he's like, all right, let's do it. But, we obviously, as I did with Ray many years ago, I'm like, all right, Evergrey comes first. I get it. I work 60 hours a week, dude. I can't take 8 weeks off a year and go touring. So I'm never going to interfere that much with that aspect of it. And, I'm also not doing this for my primary means of income. So it has to be fun. I'm doing this because it's a great creative outlet. It's an opportunity to work with some wonderful people and opportunity to engage with an audience and play music, which is fantastic. So I refuse to get that stressed out about it. And I'm fine with recognizing that Evergrey comes first, and Tom also has a family and he's got a job. So we're on the list. So we ironed all that out and made sure we were clear on expectations of what we would each be able to do. And since then, it's been just great.
Did you take into consideration that he is his own boss in Evergrey?
Yes. Yes.
Simple answer.
Yeah, but again, that's I think at the root of the "if it sucks, can I tell you" bit. Mm-hmm. And I really would want him to stop me from releasing something that he thought sucked.
Yeah.
So, and what's more important, we all have egos, but his and mine don't clash, and we sort of think about things the same way in many ways, and where we don't, it's usually because I just am too naive to have a perspective, and I trust his judgment. A good example of that is, in our video that we just released yesterday, we have a sense of visual style for the first time. With Ray, I think we all just took his lead. It was very much, I got a T-shirt and jeans on, I show up and I do my thing, which is fine. But, Evergrey has a very distinct visual style to them. A lot of black. Again, the gloomy Gothenburg. I like black too because it's slimming. So we incorporated a bit of that into our look too. But it's I trusted in him and I trusted in Patrick, our director, and I think the video looks awesome. And so we have a visual identity that we haven't had before. So that's an example of Tom having a strong opinion about something, which has been hugely beneficial. So I think that's all good.
Speaking of the video, I did not see the decrepit old dude. I was a little sad.
No, the decrepit old, I think he's still with us. He's made an appearance in an Apple commercial.
Oh, has he?
To our last video. Yeah. It was a montage. It wasn't like the history of Apple computer presented by the desiccated old dude. But there was something where you just see like a montage of 20 different people buying, selling, using Apple products, and he was one of them. So, yeah. But the content of the new video is a little bit easier on the eyes than the desiccated old dude. So
I would have to agree. Long night's journey into day. is an album title that I absolutely adore.
Thank you.
And I absolutely love how you inverted the name of the Eugene O'Neill play to come up with it. It's a really, really appropriate title given the overall theme of your music.
It fits, doesn't it? It had
Perfectly.
popped into my head a few years ago, maybe even before Art of Loss, as a potential name that I wanted to tinker with at some point, and it just popped back into my head when we were working on this, and I thought, you know what, that's a good guiding principle. It sort of represents our philosophical outlook on life. It hadn't been done, although I didn't even realize until I've been compulsively Googling for reviews. There was a very small documentary made about South Africa post-apartheid with this title about 15 years ago.
Is that so?
So somebody else came up with it, but nobody's seen it. So if a movie falls in the woods and there's no audience, does it really exist? I'm actually gratified that you and actually a fair number of other people actually understand the reference, because I've used references in the past that maybe people haven't gotten. I had to explain to a whole bunch of people that Slouching Towards Bethlehem was not a religious song. It's based on a Yeats poem.
I was one of those people. I'm so ashamed.
Oh, that's all right. Just a different literature class that you didn't take. Although it's funny, I don't think I've even read the entirety of Eugene O'Neill's play.
Really?
But obviously, I know of its existence, and I know of the substance of it, which is ironic given what the thing's about. Which is his mother. For your readers or listeners who don't know, it's more or less a semi-autobiographical account of his growing up and dealing with his mother's morphine addiction. Real happy, fun stuff. So, Long Day's Journey into Night, that's a little bit bleaker. Long Night's Journey into Day, obviously, as you pointed out, does invert that. And like I said, it represents our sort of outlook, which is life is hard, and there are moments of existence that really suck, but in general, it's awesome.
Is that where the inspiration from Eugene O'Neill ends? Is it just the title?
Just the title.
Okay, so you didn't dig any deeper into the play itself?
No, I wish I could say it was more erudite, but I just like the wordplay.
Well, it's fantastic wordplay, but at the same time, you did mention that it is a little autobiographical, and you kind of have the reputation for writing very autobiographical music. I was wondering if the new album continues your love of self-examination.
Less, I think, with the exception of Mortal Coil, which was really heavily influenced by my cancer diagnosis and treatment. And even then, I went to Chris, our drummer, and said, look, I don't want this I certainly don't want this to be a pity party. Mm-hmm. I don't even really want it to be this deeply personal revelation. It's a journey that highlights some of the idea of me dealing with my cancer diagnosis is very specific. The idea of a person confronting the inevitability of his own mortality and re-examining the choices he's made and re-examining the way he thinks about life and his relationships, interpersonal, familial, romantic, whatever they may be, that's something that everybody can relate to. So I actually worked with Chris to broaden the lyrics a little bit to make sure that I wanted a second set of eyes on them to make sure it wasn't being too autobiographical. The rest of the stuff, I've been happily married for 25 years. I got 2 wonderful kids. So if I write a song about a relationship gone bad, it's not because I've had a relationship that's gone bad. It's because we can all empathize with what it means to have something and lose it, right? Mm-hmm. Frankly, Someone Else's Problem sounds like a romantic song. To the extent it was influenced, it wasn't a romantic relationship that influenced it. Mm-hmm. So I would posit to you that when we're in a relationship with somebody, it could be family, it could be friends, it could be a coworker, it could be a romantic partner, you tend to make excuses for behavior that would otherwise be irritating, and then when they leave, that all becomes somebody else's problem. And part of you may miss that the person's gone, but you're also freed of having to make excuses for the behavior or the stuff that would irritate you.
Yeah, so that earworm of a song, I mean, believe it or not, that was that's not where my mind headed. I didn't think that it was that it was examining anybody's romantic anything. It just sounds like a part of life.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And so it's less that it's autobiographical and more that it tries to tap into common elements of the human experience. That's, I guess, at the highest level what our lyrics are about.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that makes your music so impactful. I mean, these songs stick with you because I mean, yeah, just anybody can identify with it, but there's so much to dig through. I think Pain of Salvation has the same longevity for the same reason. It's the human experience set to music, and you do the same thing in a very different way.
I will say, that's a band that I respect. My interest level in particular records sort of ebbs and flows. Not everything they do resonates. I think the last one that he did, because it's really him, if we're honest.
Yeah.
The last one that he did, which I'm now spacing on, but it's about his own mortality.
Passing light of day.
He passing light of day. That's an astonishing record.
I love it.
I mean, that's one of my favorites from the year it was released. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, he's frankly a better musician than I am and a better creative songwriter than I am. But, he can't put together a discounted cash flow and figure out how much to pay for Marvel. So we all have our strengths.
So to reference the Eugene O'Neill play one more time, there is a dead character in that play that Eugene O'Neill named after himself.
Oof.
Is that referenced anywhere in your new album?
No, I didn't know that happened until you just told me about it. And if I have a character named after me, he's going to be alive and kicking ass. I promise you that much.
That's the best way to do it. And incidentally, there was a production of that play in your area last year. Alfred Molina was the dad. Did you get a chance to go see it?
No, but he's awesome. That would have been awesome. So, yeah, I mean, that's one nice thing about living in Los Angeles is we do occasionally have pretty remarkable little things like that. I don't go to theater that often, although I have seen Hamilton twice. So I won Dad of the Year last time for taking my daughter on her birthday as a surprise.
That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't get out much. That's part of the, people say, how do you do X, Y, and Z all together? Well, I don't get out much. I don't watch a lot of movies. I'm in the movie business. I don't watch a lot of movies except on planes. I think I saw 27 movies in 2017, and like 24 of them are on planes. So that's pretty rough. But yeah, I don't get out to the theater a lot.
So I hear a lot of restraint on the new album. There's not that epic shred fest there. I mean, it's definitely there, but it's a little bit toned down. There's less of an emphasis on the flashy playing here, although it's definitely there. It just doesn't seem to be like quite the centerpiece that it had been on Art of Loss. And I was just kind of.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily, but part of Art of Loss is, and particularly where I had Marty and Chris Broderick as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of that was like, guys, just play through the whole. Pretend you're Neil Schon and you're literally just playing solos for the entire hour, and then I'll see what I can use and what I can't. And I'd always rather have more stuff than you need and cut stuff down than not have what you need. But some of it's also luck of the draw. So I did the solos that I felt comfortable doing. I know my strengths and weaknesses. My solo in And Yet is probably the best one I'll ever record. But I'm, if there's a spectrum between David Gilmour and Michael Romeo, I'm pretty squarely on the David Gilmour end of that spectrum, which is why it makes Simone, such a great juxtaposition. But also, if that's a spectrum, then there's the triangle piece of it, which is Chris Poland, who comes from this 70s fusion sensibility and sounds. I gave the record over to Simone and to Chris and said, play what you want to play. And they sent me back what they did, and I picked the stuff that I thought worked the best. Chris's style is so unusual, and occasionally he'll hit a note that's a little too blue for this genre. I remember there was one note he hit on Art of Loss and an otherwise perfect solo, and it just ended intentionally, like a half step off. And, my fillings in my teeth started rattling, and I had to repitch that one note. So it's amazing, and you go see him play live in his fusion band, and the stuff he does is just mind-boggling.
It is.
So, I take as much of that as I think works. His solo in the middle of Indulgent Color is probably my favorite solo on this record. It's just awesome. But the stuff that Simone did at the beginning and the end is more traditionally, he's at the beginning of that one actually, is more traditionally melodic and a little bit more shreddy. Although one of the things I like the most about Simone is he himself knows how to balance technique and restraint. There's stuff that he does. I remember I never gave any of them notes because I don't want them to be constrained by what I think. I want them to exercise their creativity. The title track has a section at the beginning which it's got sort of a Voivody-esque chord thing going on.
That atonal weird thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it's very irregular meter over that, and I sent it to. I just said to Simone, "Good luck with this." I would have had no idea what to do, and he came back with this crazy thing that makes it even more complicated, and yet, just when you think it's about to fall apart from over complexity, it then resolves and moves on to the next section of the song.
And that's exactly why it's one of my favorite moments in the record.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that transition there where it just becomes this huge just whirlwind of notes, and he's playing these crazy double technical arpeggios. Then it goes into something very quiet and starts building from there. So there are parts that are very shreddy, but he also has a tremendous melodic sensibility. And the solo at the beginning of Someone Else's Problem, which I'm playing in the video because I couldn't fly him in from Italy for 8 hours in the desert, that's like a really, really melodic, restrained. It's still technically complicated, very difficult to play, even very difficult to fake playing for a video. Mm-hmm. But it's not just about the shred. And overall, our entire discography is about technical capability in the service of the song. So mostly because I'm not good enough to play 45 seconds of constant 30-second notes, we're never going to have those sections in our songs. We'll have stuff that makes sense in the context of what we're trying to deliver, which is a great song.
Have you considered asking Simone to join Redemption?
Complicated subject. The answer is yes. And let's just say that without complicating his other contractual obligations, I anticipate we will remain close collaborative partners in the band going forward.
Noted.
How's that for vague?
But he will be touring with you.
And he's not a full member at this time.
Okay.
And just as Tom has obligations to Evergrey, mm-hmm. Simone has obligations to DGM, which of course is a fantastic band in its own right.
So Chris Poland and Simone played on this album again. Tom is no slouch on the guitar. I'm kind of wondering if hearing these two guys perform together with him made him a little nervous or envious.
I think he's actually, he was the one who said, I don't want to play guitar in this.
Okay.
I think it's a combination of he wants to do something different than an Evergrey. Mm-hmm. It's a tremendous pain in the ass learning the guitar parts, I will tell you that, because I'm mired in it right now. And it's a tremendous pain in the ass learning the vocals. I think he didn't want to have to do both. I do think he wants to be able to do something a little different on stage than he does in Evergrey. So for him, again, it's an opportunity for us to have a distinct identity for him outside of what he's otherwise already doing.
Can we anticipate seeing a 7-foot Swedish Axl Rose with you?
I hope not. I don't see him shimmying. He is tall, though. It's like Tom Englund and the Five Dwarves on stage.
He's a freaking giant. It's going to be so entertaining to see him on stage with you guys.
Yeah, well, he doesn't exactly wear flats either, so he's going to have like these enormous boots that are going to make him Herman Munster tall. So we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do.
I'm sure you recall the moment that his hair got stuck in the rafters at ProgPower 1.
I absolutely do recall that moment.
Do you think that's going to happen again this year?
The stage is bigger. I think we'll be all right.
He's tall enough. Come on now.
Never say never.
So you've written another sequel on this album.
Yes. Did I do one before?
It kind of sounded like Memory was.
Oh yeah. Memory was it's a
sapphire.
I would call it a companion piece.
Okay.
And I would say that Black and White, that Indulge is certainly a companion piece to Black and White World.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was part of it was, I guess the test case, which is a strange way to phrase it, was I knew I wanted to try to capture lightning in a bottle. So, this is the equivalent of putting a bottle out in a lightning storm. And a little bit of inspiration for that came from, I remember Symphony X, one of my favorite songs of theirs from years ago is The Accolade off Divine Wings of Tragedy. And they did a sequel to that. And I thought, you know what, if I get some grist for the creative mill out of something that I've done before that I thought really is one of our defining and best musical moments, let's just see what would come of that. And the phrase indulge in color is one that I had been mulling over for the last couple of years, and I forget where I heard it in the first place, but it was already connected thematically to Black and White World in that sense. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what if, and I didn't have any lyrics to it yet, I just knew the phrase indulge in color. What if we just listened to that song and took a little bit of a germ from that and see if we let it grow in a different way, what would happen? And so there's a thematic connection in the lyrics and in the overall sort of ultimate optimism of the song. And there's a little bit of musical cross-pollination in the very beginning, which I did, again, by design. But it sort of takes off in unexpected directions. And, it feels like a companion piece rather than a sequel for those reasons. But I think, it's along with Black and White World, it's one of the things I'm most proud of us having done.
It's that one is definitely growing on me, and Black and White World is probably my favorite Redemption song. So kind of hearing it, like I didn't read the bio or anything when I first read the album. When I first listened to the album, I just listened to it and I recognized it immediately, and it's definitely growing on me. Like the whole thing, it didn't grab me immediately. It's
sure,
but it's really starting to grow on me over these past few days.
Hey, I'd much rather have it be like that than because something you gradually get sick of. So, which describes the creative process completely from this end of things.
So you broached the subject of partisan tunnel vision on the echo chamber. Is the today's political climate a little bit distressing to you?
Yeah, it is. We don't do a lot of political songs, and this isn't about pursuing a particular agenda. It's more about our growing inability. Or rather, our growing opportunity to isolate ourselves and not be challenged to broaden our perspectives. And it used to be that if you were a lunatic on the left or on the right, you'd sort of be shunned by polite society, and you would temper your opinions because you didn't want to be a total pariah, with a few exceptions. And you were forced to find common ground. Even if you didn't agree with somebody, there was a notion of civil discourse, and that the right way to conduct yourself as a human being was to have a respectful exchange of ideas, and it is what it is. And, I think you can trace a line from the proliferation of talk radio, and in particular social media, allows people to fixate on fringe opinions and be surrounded with enough people that share those fringe opinions that you start to lose sight of the fact that you're a fucking wacko, if I may be blunt. So really, it's about the tragedy of a growing inability for ourselves to communicate in a respectful way and make an idea better by combining different perspectives instead of focusing on the lowest common denominator of stuff that we agree with at its most extreme. And if you want to talk about, maybe the Gothenburg skies are gloomy, the most depressing thing I've ever had to do in music was sort through every YouTube clip I could find of offensive speakers on the right and left to handpick the stuff for the background of that one section. Mm-hmm. You try spending an afternoon listening to everything that Ann Coulter's ever said to find the worst thing. see how good that makes you feel.
I don't know if I would make it out alive, to be completely honest. I commend you for not being suicidal after that.
That was a bleak couple of days, dude. So, anyhow.
Wow.
But, and that's a song that I wasn't, you go back and forth and you have love-hate relationships with the stuff, and you're so close to it that you don't know if it's any good or not. And that's always been, I think that's Tom's favorite on the record. He's always been a proponent of that fan, and, we'll be performing it, of that song. We'll be performing it live. And it's not one that I initially thought was going to be one that I loved, but between his passion for it and then Simone's playing, which really, really elevates it, it's now one of my favorites.
So you mentioned the song "The Origins of Ruin" earlier on, and then you mentioned "And Yet." To me, they kind of sound like companion pieces.
Oddly enough, I mean, it's certainly the same mood. This very stripped down thing. Frankly, I wanted, it's something was fun for Tom to sing on. It's I'm also don't want our records, and I could be accused of this. We have an awful lot of up tempo songs. I don't want every one of our records to just be 160 beats per minute. If I was going to do that, I'd be in a death metal band. Mm-hmm. So I wanted something that sort of created a little bit of a breath for people. To the extent it's a companion piece to someone else's problem. It's the,
Okay.
you know, you're someone else's problem now, ... But if I think about it, I still miss that relationship. Even though I know it wasn't healthy, there are still parts of it that I miss. So that's sort of the, hence, and yet is a continuation of that theme.
That is so human, you know.
Yeah.
And to put so many, you know, so many tracks in between those two, is kind of emblematic, isn't it?
Yep. It's only with time and perspective that you can really think about, you know, those sorts of situations and the long-lasting impact they have on you.
Mm.
Boing!
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
So you also went ahead and did another cover song on this album, and this time from a band that a lot of people love to hate lately.
Yeah, I haven't really been tracking the zeitgeist as pertains you to. It was, you know, we have this thing about picking songs that, you know, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. My two favorite songs ever are probably Subdivisions and Hallowed Be Thy Name. Mm-hmm. You don't need to do a cover of either of those songs. First of all, the original is perfect. Second of all, they've been covered to death. And I don't want to do a cover of a heavy metal song. It's just, it's too easy, and it's too predictable, and in most cases, it's not going to be as good as the original, so why bother? And we tempted fate, frankly, last time out by doing the Who song, which I've always felt is the greatest vocal in classic rock history. And I always said you can't do that unless you crush the vocal, because otherwise you just sound like it's a very poor imitation of the original. And that's why I took John Bush's unbelievable performance on that to give me the balls to frankly release it.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So in you know, we like the idea of mining sort of classic rock and new wave for stuff that they're great songs, but they haven't really been filtered through hard rock or metal context. Mm. And, you know, we record stuff that we don't release. Not all of them work. There are 2 or 3 songs we've done. One actually was a really cool mashup, if you can believe it, of Salisbury Hill and Red Barchetta, which have the same chord progression. And I even threw a little Number of the Beast lick there in the end of it. And, you know, ultimately it was cool, but it just didn't quite work. It sounded a little too affected.
Was that before? Was that for that companion CD to Mortal Coil?
No, this was for, might have been for, it was either for Snowfall or Origins. So okay. It's been a while. And, you know, so sometimes they don't work. I'd heard this, I was wondering what one we should do. I heard the U2 song on the radio. I'm like, you know what? This is a good song. I could see you crank up the tempo a little bit, throw in some heavy guitars, and let's see what happens. And Tom crushed it vocally, and Simone plays his head off on it. And I figured the original solo is both so iconic that you can't not have it, and also something that I'm capable of executing. So it made sense, and I think it comes across great.
So you also touched on Vic being in the band now early on in the discussion.
Yes.
I don't know. Like it kind of feels like there's a little bit more left there that I want to discuss, but I can't really put my finger on it. I mean, it seems like such an obvious choice. I mean, he's been a long-time ProgPower attendee, an incredibly skilled musician. I'm kind of surprised that it didn't happen before.
Yeah, well, you know, we have a wonderful alumni for our band named Greg Hasharian, who played keyboards with us when we between Origins of Ruin, and then he played on Snowfall. And we parted amicably. He has other musical interests, and he didn't want to be, as he put it, I don't want to be a rock star. He's basically devoted his life to Armenian music, both popular and classical, because he has deep roots in that community. His father was the conductor of an Armenian orchestra in Los Angeles, and Greg is a very, very accomplished classical musician as well. So he conducts that orchestra now, and he writes for that orchestra and does a bunch of other stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, so I sort of, for Mortal Coil, we didn't. It wasn't going to be that intensive a keyboard record, and I was capable. And it was sort of abrupt. So I figured I'll just do the keyboards for that. And I wanted to leave the door open because we were sort of still talking with Greg. And I'm better, frankly, in some ways on piano than I am on guitar. So I can do it, but at some point you become a prisoner of your own thinking, and it's one less person adding to the creative mix. And there's a limit to what we can do live because I can't play both instruments. And I also, I Vic is just another level talent-wise. And so I was only introduced to him about a year ago by Tom, because Tom found out about him since he had been recording piano-only versions or arrangements of Evergrey songs. Mm-hmm. And he's a delightful guy. He was just a super guy and incredibly talented, as I've said. And he also thinks about his musical vocabulary is much more extensively tuned than mine is, because this is what he's decided to do for a living. This is what he studied in college. And so I remember little bits of theory here and there. He understands at an order of magnitude more intensively than I do. So but we also hear things the same way compositionally. So we have the same sensibilities in terms of writing stuff. He just knows a little bit more about how to I can get from point A to point B. He can get from point A to some point in a different alphabet that I wouldn't have thought of, and then back to point C. And so I think as we get, it's going to open up a lot of possibilities compositionally in terms of live performance. And then also he's just a tremendous creative guy. So it's going to be good to get him involved in the songwriting as well.
That was my next question. What can we expect from him?
Next record, I think, and we've talked about this, as you might imagine, somewhat extensively. I think for us to sound like Redemption, the idea is start with me. But I, used to send them around to a couple of people who would weigh in, a couple of people who might have been less interested in weighing in. I'm now sending it around to more people that are interested in weighing in, and people that are used to writing songs for, a variety of genres, and have a tremendous amount of energy to do so. So turning that over to Vic, and I might even also be able to turn over stuff that's not as fully fleshed out and said, I like these three things. This sounds like it could be a good part for a verse. This sounds like it could be a good part for a chorus. I want this sort of big finish building around this recurring motif. And he can put together connective tissue to it and send it back to me. And so there's an opportunity to, I think, really sort of grow in a way that still sounds like Redemption, but isn't repeating ourselves.
I am definitely looking forward to hearing that. Did he contribute at all to the new album?
Yeah, little bits and pieces and flavors here or there. Now, I wouldn't say there's anything major. He didn't write anything per se, but he did. I can't remember which song. He did one of the solos, and little seasoning the souffle at the very end of the cooking process. And frankly, I didn't even expect him to be able to do that, but we took so bloody long to mix this thing that we just had a couple of unexpected bites at the apple at the end. So he weighed in to the extent we could have him, but I think we're going to see and hear a lot more of his involvement going forward.
I have to tell you that I'm definitely looking forward to hearing how he and Tom reinterpret your older material. Yeah,
you and me both. So here's an example where I'm at the risk of betraying more of our set list. We're going to play Noonday Devil off. I should have just genericized it and said it doesn't matter. But for those familiar with our music, there's an extended Bernie guitar solo in that song, which is pretty awesome. So we were in rehearsals, and he had just taken it upon himself to learn the entire thing on keys. So he literally can play that ridiculous Bernie guitar solo pretty much note for note, by ear, mind you, on his keyboard. So, it's going to be awesome Simone's going to play half of it, but it's going to be pretty fun to see those two guys shred back and forth.
I think September's going to be a good month.
Yeah, I think so too.
Oh, you guys are playing a show in LA shortly after ProgPower. Are you guys booking a whole tour?
Well, I don't know about a whole tour. We had toyed with the idea of trying to take most of September and go across the country. It's real hard to make that work economically and logistically. And it's complicated planning this stuff. So what I'm hopeful that we're going to do is play a handful of other dates that are probably West Coast based. So if we can pull it off, Northern California, Vegas, Phoenix, maybe another show in San Diego, something like that. It's not going to be extensive, but if we can do 6 or 8 dates over the course of those 3 weeks, I think that's a good opportunity for us to get out, stretch a little bit, and then Tom being over here for 3 weeks will have an opportunity to maybe write some stuff. So we'll make use of the time. Certainly hope that a fair amount of that time is spent in front of audiences.
Back in 2007, I think it was, you guys opened for Dream Theater for several dates. Is there
more than several? That was about 30, if memory serves.
30 days. Oh, okay, plenty of dates. The full tour. Yeah. Is there anything like that that you might consider these days?
It's challenging, both because bands, Dream Theater does evening with now, so they don't really generally have openers. And so you need to have a combination of a band that's popular enough for the tour to draw, and for them to be able to actually pay people as opposed to having a buy-on, because I'm not going to buy onto a tour. And it has to be big enough to matter, but not so big that I can't do it. I can't, like I said, I can't take off 4 months if Iron Maiden said, you can open for us, but you have to do the whole tour, I'd have to say no, even though that's crazy. And then they're never going to ask us, obviously. But my point is, there's a real small bullseye for pulling something like that off. It has to be a band that's very big, but not so big that they don't want to just play by themselves. So I don't know. I'll know that opportunity when I see it.
Well, I think that we made it all the way through my cheat sheet.
Awesome.
Yeah. Is there something that we've overlooked?
No. I mean, I love our conversations. It's a dialogue between friends, and I'm privileged to be talking with a friend who actually knows and cares about the music side of my life. So I always think of these things as just a fun conversation, and I think we covered a lot of stuff that hopefully your listeners will find interesting.
I hope so. The only thing that was missing was a few beers.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll make up for that in Atlanta.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see you at all in Atlanta this past time. Were you hiding?
I usually try to hide for a variety of reasons. I was there last year. I actually spent a fair amount of time hanging out with Tom and Simone and Vikram for reasons that in hindsight are now obvious to people. But yeah, I was there. This year, frankly, we've got a lot of work, so I don't know how much time I'm going to have to socialize. Between what would already be an immense amount of work rehearsing with all these people, and we've also got, we're filming, and that's very, very time consuming. So I'm getting back to where we started our conversation with, which is I'm spread too thin. So hopefully I'll be able to chip away at some of these things, and I actually got a call from Glenn Harveston in 15 minutes. So I'm glad we made it through your stuff, because I got to hop.
All right. Well, it's always a pleasure talking to you, Nick. And one more thing. When you see him or when you hear from him, please send Bernie my warmest on behalf of all the Redemption and Angel Steel fans out there. That
I will.
We're out here pulling for him,
I know, as are we. I mean, look, the reality is he's not going to die, which is great. He's recovered to the point where he's mostly functional, and he's living with family, and he's in a good place psychologically. I don't know how soon, if ever, he's going to return to playing guitar. And I'm in touch with his mom more regularly than I am with him, but I just spoke with her yesterday because I'm sending him a copy of the CD. So I will definitely convey your best wishes.
Thank you.
All right, Gons. Always good talking with you. Take care.
Right, man. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Once again, that was the one and only Nick Van Dyk, the brains behind the prog-metal band Redemption. Redemption's new album, Long Night's Journey Into Day, will be out on Metal Blade Records on July 27th. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast in order to get notified of all our interviews, and also don't forget about our Talking Perspectives podcast discussion, which will be back on the road whenever Nick gets back from Europe, because he's out there having a good time. And also, look for us on Twitter, look for us on Facebook, look for us and subscribe to us on YouTube. And our website is www.sonicperspectives.com. Once again, this is Gonzo the Unpronounceable, and I'm going to take you out with track 2 from Long Night's Journey Into Day. The video dropped earlier this week. This is Someone Else's Problem.